like, let's just rewind to when you were first, when you like, oh no, I need to watch that, the replay. Where were you, like, mentally? Like, how were you feeling? What were you thinking that caused you to, like, reach out and send me a message and be like, can we have a chat?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. So I had just found out that I was going to be taking, I'd accepted an offer for redundancy. I was finishing my MBA, and I was on the brink of having a holiday and knowing that I had some decisions to make in the short term as to what I was going to do. And I also knew enough about myself and my character that if I didn't put some intentional plans in place, they didn't have to be really defined, but if I didn't put some intentional plans in place, that I would just jump ship and say yes to the first offer. I also knew, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I had to slow down. And so I'd given myself, the Christmas break to do that. But up until that point, it wasn't really, I didn't have a game plan. I just knew that I wanted to take time, but I didn't know, again, knowing myself, I didn't know how I was going to fill my time, fill my days in the lead up. That's where I was at. And I came across your session with Mountbatten alumni, and I just thought, I'm traveling, but as soon as I get back, I registered for the session anyway, so I'd get it. And then I thought I'd reach out to you after I had a chance to watch it.
Yeah. So glad you did. I'm so glad you did. And that you've been an amazing client to work with. What do you think was, like, most useful for you as you think about the process that we went through in terms of helping you to unpack and get clarity around what you even want, and then moving into positioning yourself? Like, can you just speak to some of the things that you found most useful in that process?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I think the biggest thing was that you slowed down the process for me. So just the fact that we were meeting in the beginning on a weekly basis. And I liked that in one of our first meetings, you said to me, because one of my questions was, do I have to update my LinkedIn profile now? And you're like, no, absolutely not, because what are you repositioning for? And that was so refreshing, because I was like, oh, thank God, because I don't even know what I want to do, and I don't actually want to touch it. So it was nice that you were really intentional with the why we were doing it in the order that we were. And that gave me clarity and, I guess, confidence from the beginning that I always said to you, I'm like, I totally trust the process. It's probably not the way I would have organized myself. And I totally trust the process. Like you've more than done this on numerous occasions with different women from all walks of life. So it's like, I get it. So that was really helpful. And then this, like, some of the specifics around, like, I mean, I know that LinkedIn module that you gave me around, again, lessons within lessons about, and you and I were diving into it in different orders based on what I had to do. That was really helpful to just understand the back end of LinkedIn and how I can really use the search function and use it in different ways to like make meaningful connections. And then hands down, the biggest thing for me has been around those meaningful connections. So I was really daunted. I feel like how I've started to use LinkedIn as a tool, and certainly how I did so to make some of those initial inroads with some of the employers that I was hoping to get information from. So those informational interviews were brilliant in terms of how I even just simply write to someone who or connect with someone who I don't know anything about, and how I make those, how I identify commonalities or a reason for wanting to connect with them in a way that sounded genuine. So you started me off with templates, and I was then able to make the words my own so that it felt more natural on my part. And I felt like I got a response from there. So individuals were willing to connect. I had some really great conversations with individuals, not just hiring managers, but individuals who were really passionate about the work that they did and were happy to extend that time for me to kind of learn more about their career journey. So that was quite powerful. And I know that that's something I'll continue to take throughout my career, because I have that confidence of actually it's just as invigorating for someone at the other end. I don't feel like I'm wasting their time, which would have been a barrier for me a barrier for me for the longest time. So that was really helpful too.
Yeah, and we did some work around like you really getting clear on what your values were. And I guess we'll talk about where you've got to, but it's really interesting that we did that at the beginning stages. And I remember there was some points in the process where you were like, okay, I have a timeline and I want to be in a role by May, and kind of like, oh, and I'm just like, Reese, we're gonna get but yeah, can you speak to like that piece around the timing? Because I think often people, they know what they want and it's like, I just want to move, especially if they feel frustrated in the role that they're in, or like if they're like you, it's like, okay, I'm coming to the end of a role and I need to make sure that I have something lined up. So yeah, like how are you thinking now in retrospect about that timing piece? Because I know for you at points it was a bit like, oh, this is actually going to happen.
Yes, look, 100%. I'm naturally, as you know, like I live and work in projects and I'm very deadline driven. And yes, there was that initial feeling of like, but hang on, how are we going to do a LinkedIn profile when I don't even know what I want to do? And start applying for jobs and do the interviews. So there was a level of, I guess, skepticism as to how. And I guess now retrospectively, I see that, while the work that you do follow, like you've got your rigor as to kind of how you're working with individuals, but I can see that it would flex based on where I was at. I might have come to you and been completely like, Janine, this is the job, I want this. And I know that we would have spent our sessions honing and crafting and revisiting that approach. For me, it was a much more exploratory, like I had enough of an understanding of like what I wanted to do. Admittedly, I was like my strengths, in the mix on top of all of that. But I think that you really helped. The confidence that came with slowing the process down, it was very intentional certainly on your part. And I can see that now. There was still structure around it. So I didn't ever feel like it was a free for all. In the beginning, I might have been like, I don't know how it's going to happen, but trusting in the process and seeing the work that we were doing, and certainly you assigned me work. And as you say, I was equally eager to get it done, not because it felt like a chore, but I was learning and I was enjoying along the way. And it was opening my mind to thinking about, I guess, not only my skill set and the value and the experience that I've brought to date, but how I could reposition that or see that in different lights for other industries and for other opportunities. So again, going back to your question, while I didn't do it while I was kind of fixated on the time to begin with, seeing the inroads week to week and the progress. But I'm not going to lie, there were certainly some weeks I was like, I don't want to do this call because I don't feel like I'm either prepared enough or I've done enough of the work, or I just they're not responding to me. It was challenging, but I also know that the right opportunities came to me through the persistence and trust in the process as well. And that's not to say I just left it to, the fairies. I mean, there was a lot of work in there too. So
it was work. You did the work. And that's what I love. It's like you showed up, you did the work, even when you were like, oh, I don't know if I'm making progress. Do I want to go to this call? You still showed up. And I always say to people, like, it's a partnership. It's like, I can support you, but then like you have to do the work. Otherwise we can't move forward.
Yeah.
You did the work, which is great.
And there's the other part of that. I know that I came to you and I said, the reality is I said to you, I feel like I've been gifted this because I have the time to do it. I can appreciate that for some individuals, it may look different and they may be like, I actually do have to work, and under the circumstance. In my case, it was such that I could take that time. And in saying that, obviously, for whatever reason, if that wasn't another individual's path, there's still, I feel like the work you were doing is still so valuable, because even if they had to take work in the interim to support themselves, I feel like the work, the things that you've taught me and the things that we've worked through, I've saved all like my worksheets and my information. It's an approach that I will carry on regardless of whether I stay in this role for 1 month, 10 years. It's still, you've given me skills that will empower me throughout my career. It's not sort of for this fix. And I had already said to you, like, it doesn't matter if it's not about this dream job that you're going to help me with, you're actually changing my mindset now. And that's where I'm going to keep making the progress going forward. So thank you.
Okay, let's just briefly talk a little bit about mindset because there's process that you can follow, there's tasks that you can do, but ultimately there always going to be limiting beliefs that come up, and there's going to be some mindset issues. How do you feel like the approach that we took to managing your mindset was helpful? Or what would you say about that, like the mindset?
So can I tell you so the affirmations, one of the exercises, that was one that you gave me really early in the piece. And I remember listening to your video and just being like, none of these things relate to me, because a lot of the affirmations were around really specific, like, this job is looking for me. It was really specific. And I wasn't even at that point in time, I wasn't even there. But I can tell you right now, when I was meeting that advisor and I was like, do you know what, if he's going to be another consultant and he's going to be dismissive and everything, I'm just going to walk straight out of this job. And in my mind, though, the affirmations that were coming to me, like all the way down that process, were the ones that you were talking about. And I was like, suddenly they were there. And I could tell that there was, like, I was invested at that point, right? Like I was like, I do want to make, if this is the right role, or if this opportunity is a good one, I do want to make a good impression. But it was almost like I was hedging my bets, going, but if they're going to be, if it isn't right, then I don't want to. But equally, those affirmations were still going through my mind, right? So the mindset, I think, I mean, we're human. I feel like it does this for everyone, but I feel like the work that we did around mindset and framing that, and you always came from a place where, like, your strengths, and I know even in your podcast, you say this to your audiences around, your life. And I still say it to my friends and colleagues who are kind of at roadblocks. It's like, don't underestimate what you've done as life experience, as opposed, don't confuse it with work experience, because we all have so much. But what you spent so much time with me doing around unpacking my strengths, it was no longer about the jobs I was doing or the position descriptions or the titles that I had in my career. It was about the things that I was doing. What did I enjoy? There was an exercise in there when we talked about, the key things that I had achieved, and it was less around the job titles I had or the things that I enjoyed. And it was more about the projects and the opportunities, the things that I led as a result of the title that I had or the role or the company that I was working in. And looking at your career that way, I feel like we're not programmed to do, even when you look at like a LinkedIn profile or a CV, it's like job title, duration, and then bullet point. Like it gave a more fluid view to like the whole package of you and your offering, and then being able to speak to that value, having an understanding of how that plays, the strengths then play to what potentially the employer needs. It was just an interesting way to frame the process, but then equally the mindset around, well, actually it's all achievable. It's just how you approach your challenge, if you like.
Yeah, that packaging and positioning piece. And so do you want to share like where you're at now? Like what are you doing now, Reese?
So I've accepted an offer for another university. It's one that's actually closer to home. The role is with their strategy office. It's for the program management unit, and I'll be leading on some of the strategic initiatives that the university is planning to land as part of the broader 2032 strategy. So they're rolling a 10-year strategy. And I'm really looking forward to getting to know my team and the clients that I get to work with to realize some of these really cool key ambitions for the uni.
Yeah, and do you know what's so exciting is that when I heard you share about the role, so much of the work that we did at the beginning around like what your values are, what's important to you, like what you want to see, what kind of lifestyle you want to have, like this role is allowing you to do those things, or this role is like the alignment is just so on point. and I think it's you, like you said before, like taking the time to slow down and really evaluate, what do I actually want, and who am I as a person, and what do I bring to the table, and being able to lay that all out and then see how this role like is so well aligned. That's the exciting piece. It's not just like, oh yeah, I just applied for another role and I got it. It's like, no, this was very, very intentional and not a quick thing, but it came together so beautifully at the end.
I think, in all honesty, and I feel like a lot of this will continue to kind of really make its impact in the weeks and months to come as I bed down into the role. One of the immediate observations, I know this was an earlier question that we had, was around, if I hadn't been doing this with you, I probably would have applied for like 4 times the amount of roles, rehashed my CV and a cover letter just to meet that need, to feel like I was, again, doing something towards my job hunt process. And it would have been a job hunt as opposed to what's my next career opportunity, what could it look like? And so this gave me that real intentional pause to be, really thinking around or understanding, you know, what strengths do I bring, what are my values, and how can I then align that with the needs of another employer, as opposed to I need a job and I just need a job. Totally changed the way that I would look at it. So
because you didn't take that scattergun approach. It's like you only had like a few conversations about opportunities, but then landed one that is like a brilliant one.
very much aligned. So
oh, Reese, I'm so excited for you. You must keep us posted on how
thank you.
I know you're going to make like incredible impact where you're going. So thank you for the opportunity to guide you. Yeah, be great.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Janine.
Thanks, Reese.